I'll try not to reiterate everything, and in fact, that's what I wanted Bill to do in reintroducing the story. Last time we talked an awful lot about Elijah and Elisha, and how that Elisha was witness to the chariots of fire that came and took Elijah into heaven, and how Elisha had prayed for a double portion of the spirit of Elijah, which is probably an insane request to request that type of a spirit. Elisha was an exceptional person. Elisha, very much like Elijah, was not motivated by fear, but motivated by love and by their devotion and following God. He also, because of this relationship, had some special insight, and as Bill read, it seems like God knew what the king of Syria, Aram, Syria, whatever you want to call it. Syria is probably the name we're more familiar with. God was listening to those prayers and letting Elisha know what was going on. So Elisha would tell the king of Israel, okay, the Syrians are going to be at this place, so we need to be moving. Which obviously frustrated the king of Syria, because every time he would make it a plan to come after the Israelites, they didn't show up. Something was going wrong. So he was getting very, 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 very frustrated. Angry, to say the least. So he sends his army out. What you got to keep in mind is the Syrians were a ruthless people. The Syrians basically had no country of their own. They lived totally on scavenging off of the people. They would wait until the crops were harvested or ready to harvest, and then they would raid the country. They would know when people were at their weakest and attack them at that point in time. That was their entire existence. The Syrians were ruthless people. And so we begin in verse 15 with the understanding that the ruthless Syrians, who are already pretty angry with this man named Elisha because he keeps giving the word out about where they're at. Now, when the attendant of the man of God, that would be Elisha, the attendant of Elisha had risen early and gone out, behold, an army with horses and chariots was circling the city. And his servants said to him, Alas, my master, what shall we do? I'm not reading that with enough enthusiasm, because I imagine it wasn't a matter, alas, what shall we do? I imagine it was a matter of, alas, what shall we do? These guys weren't here yesterday morning. These guys weren't here last night when we went to bed. Where did they come from? What are they doing here? I thought we were going to be free of those people because we've got Elisha on our side. The servant of Elisha was scared. The servant of Elisha probably would respond exactly the way that Dwight would if he woke up one morning and he was surrounded by the enemy. Elisha's answer in verse 16, do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. That sounds good. Sounds really, really good. And we try to remember that in the way we live our lives. But for those of us who like to see things, I'm sure his servant said, no, they're not. I'm looking around, and our guys haven't even got out of bed this morning. They haven't put on their armor. They're not ready. What do you mean those who are with us are more than those who are with them? You've got this all wrong, Elisha. Don't you see? Can't you see? Then Elisha prayed and said, O Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. What do you think the servant felt then? Even in reading this is one of my favorite stories in the Bible. I'll tell you that in advance. Even as reading this, I can almost feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Can you imagine to be in that situation? From 1 minute scared, absolutely scared to death, and the next minute the veil is lifted and you see that, oh my, chariots of fire have encircled the enemy. Our God, He is alive. We just sang. Now, all of a sudden, he's a believer. Now he sees, now he believes, now he has confidence. Yes, yes, the good guys are going to win. In great enthusiasm. Have you ever been in that situation? Have you ever been in that situation where it goes from 1 minute that you're in total fear, and the next minute you're exalting the power of God? Exalting in the success, exalting in the victory that you hadn't been able to see because God has opened your eyes. Open my eyes that I may see. Now, as I mentioned last time, I delivered this lesson over at Southeast probably 15 years ago, and I did a really, really good job. I knew that until I got in the car on the way home and Peggy started critiquing. And one of the things that she pointed out was, what makes you think that Elisha saw the chariots? Elisha wanted his servant to see the chariots of fire just like he saw them. But she said, what makes you think that Elisha even saw those chariots? And I went back and I reread it, and she's right. It doesn't say that Elisha saw them. He prayed that his servant would see them. Hebrews 11:1. Now faith is assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. We don't have to see the victory. Elisha didn't have to see the victory. I don't know if he saw them or not, but there is no indication that he did. Someone stood in this pulpit a few years ago and made this statement that I think is rather profound. Man says, I will believe it when I see it. But God says, when you believe it, then you will see it. When you believe it, then you'll see it. But you've got to be able to walk out on faith. You've got to trust. By faith, Moses, when he left Egypt, was not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is unseen. Was there uncertainty in his life? Yeah, probably so, but he didn't let the uncertainty hold him back. John 20:29, Jesus said to Thomas, because you have seen me, you have believed. But blessed are those who did not see and yet believed. Do we walk by faith or do we walk by sight? Unfortunately, most of the time, or I should say a lot of the time, Dwight walks by sight, not by faith. Why do I do that? Usually it's because of fear, because of distraction. Something has caught my attention. 2020, for those of y'all, what are we going to do when we have to shut down services? How are we going to fellowship? What's happening with our community? What's happening with our schools? What's happening at our church? What's happening at work? And we fail to see God is still out there, which is the second point. Now, Pecky didn't come up with this one. I came up with this one. So I'm going to take credit for that one. What makes you think that God sent the chariots of fire when he saw the Syrians coming? What if those chariots of fire had been there all along? What if the chariots of fire, what if the chariots of God had accompanied Elisha all along, had always been there? As I mentioned in class this morning, sometimes we listen to statements from the world, and then we try to apply that to our theology. But have you ever heard this statement? When one door closes, another opens. And you may have even heard it, when life closes a door, God opens another for you. Have you ever heard that? Raise your hand if you would. I'll take my glasses off. Okay, you've heard that. Now I'm not going to ask you if you've used that, but I will ask you, do you have any idea who said that? It wasn't Jesus and it wasn't God. It wasn't Paul or Peter or James or any of the names that you might recognize. It was actually Alexander Graham Bell. And he made this famous announcement, when one door closes, another opens. Actually, the full statement goes something like this: when one door closes, another door opens. But we often look so long and so regretfully upon the closed door that we do not see the one which opened for us. We often look at the one that was closed and fail to see the one that was opened for us. This gets back to the vision aspect that we were trying to focus on at the beginning of last year. We're beginning to not normalize. I hate to use that term. We're beginning to go back to emphasizing the vision of community with God, community with each other, and community with the people our neighbors. Activities are coming up in the next few weeks, and activities are planned for the summer that will encourage us to get out there. And now that this door has been closed and another one has been opened, wait a minute. I would challenge that thought. What if the doors have always been open? What if instead of when one door shuts, God opens another? What if God says, the doors are all open, don't you see them? What if in our lives we choose to take the first door because that's a convenient one, or that's the one that we're used to, that's the way we're normally accustomed to, so we go that route? And God says to us, all along, I had other doors open. You just chose not to go there. What if Elijah was saying to his servant, I know you're excited about the victory out here with all of these chariots. They've been here all along. Why do you think I can act? Why do you think I can move and exist the way that I do? It's because I know that God is always with me. When I say, if God be for us, who can be against us? I mean it, because I never leave him and he never leaves me. He will not forsake me. Don't want to get carried away, so we'll go ahead and get to the second part. Now this is where it gets weird. We talked about this in class this morning. If you ask God for something, don't be surprised with the answer that he gives you. I love the story and how it progresses. Then Elisha prayed, open his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire around Elisha. Yes, we're going to win. We're going to beat these guys. We're finally going to destroy the Syrians. And when they had came down, verse 18, Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, strike this people with blindness, I pray. So he struck the people being the Syrians, strike them with blindness according to the word of Elisha. And Elisha said to them, this is not the way, nor is it the city. Remember, they'd come to find Elisha because he was the one who was telling them what the king was thinking in his bedroom. But Elisha said, this is not the way, nor is this city. Follow me, and I will bring you to the man whom you seek. And he brought them to Samaria. Now the man that he brought them to was going to be the king of Israel. The king of Israel at that time was Jehoram, which probably doesn't really ring a bell for most of us. But you may remember his mom and daddy, Ahab and Jezebel. And you remember Ahab and Jezebel were probably if you're a comic book fan, they are the arch enemy of Elijah. They sought to kill Elijah. They made that their life's intent was to get rid of Elijah. And now the king of Syria has made his intent to kill Elisha. So the tension is building. They finally got things under control. God's chariots have come to reassure them. Elisha has struck the people blind. They don't know what's going on. I don't know how much their blindness was completely blind or if they were just vision impaired or however it was. But somehow they go to Samaria and they walk into the city. And when they come to Samaria in verse 20, and Elisha said, "O Lord, open the eyes of these men that they may see." So the Lord opened their eyes. Once again, he's praying to open eyes. And they saw, and behold, they were in the midst of Samaria. The Syrians had actually walked in to their enemy's camp, into the city of Samaria. When their eyes opened, they had the reverse impression that Elisha's servant had. Oh no, we're going to lose. Whereas Elisha's servant said, yes, we've got this. Chariots of God are all around. Then the king of Israel, when he saw this, said to Elisha, "My father, shall I kill them? Shall I kill them?" Now, Elisha, when he's talking to Elisha and referring to him as his father, it's not his literal father. But it's out of respect, because Jehoram was, unlike his mother and father, had dedicated his life to serving God. He'd gotten rid of the prophets of Baal. He wasn't doing the greatest job in the world, but at least he was trying. He was striving. And so the natural response of, now that we've got this horrible enemy, the Syrians, in the camp with us, we need to fix it. "My father, shall I kill them? Shall I kill them?" Now here's the cool part. And Elisha answered, "You shall not kill them. Would you kill those whom you have taken with your sword and with your bow? Set bread and water before them, and they may eat and drink and go to their master." So he prepared a great feast for them, and when they had eaten and drunk, he sent them away, and they went to their master, and the marauding bands of the Syrians did not come again into the land of Israel. Boy, I didn't see that one coming, did you? That's just the total reverse of what I would have done. That's just a total reverse of what the king of Samaria, what Jehoram was expecting to do. Okay, we've got them. Finally, they're in our grasp. Let's kill them. I think one of the points of the story, the fact that that is thrown in there, is number one, God is always there. Whether we see it or not, God is always there. God has the victory in hand. It's just a matter of whether we want to accept that and move forward with it. But number two, if you're marching in God's army, don't expect things to go the way of human thought. Isaiah 55, "My ways are not your ways, my thoughts are not your thoughts." The human thought said we get rid of them by killing them. God's way of thinking was, no, you get rid of them by treating them with respect, and they go their way. The Syrians would eventually fade away. Obviously, their society wasn't going to exist because they had no country. When you follow in God's army, expect him to take you in places you wouldn't otherwise go. Expect him to lead you to do things that you might not expect. But follow in faith. This week in the Community with God section, it's going to, Wednesday. Listen to a song, it's called Warrior by Hannah Kerr. When we picked that song out, I listened to it. Now I want you to listen to it this week and think about, what if you were a warrior of God? You are a warrior for God. Are you a warrior for God that's going to follow even when he decides to take a left turn when you're expecting to turn right, even when things are unexpected? The situation here is that for most of us humans, we are driven, at least to some degree, by our fear and concern and uncertainty in life. And so too often we take the easy route, or we respond in the wrong ways. God says, follow me. Perfect love, my perfect love will drive out fear. It will give you confidence. You can walk like Elisha, that you can see the chariots, that you can feel them in your life. And it will cause you to act different from everybody else in the world. I would be willing to, I got into trouble in class, I'm not going to say a bit. I imagine had the situation been reversed here, that the Israelites wound up in the Syrian camp, they would have all been executed. But that's not what happened. They wound up in God's camp. Open our eyes, Lord. Open our eyes. I apologize for this in advance, but because I'm no Kyle, but I want to sing a short verse to you this morning. As I was listening to it on the way into the services this morning, I thought, yes, this is what it's about. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Ain't that the truth? You know why this world is in such a mess? Do you know why we're in such a mess? Because we're walking by sight and not by faith. And when you believe it, you see it. And it's been my experience so far that when God lets you see it, it's a whole lot better than what you ever expected. It's surprising. And the things of this world grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Who would have thought that a victorious God would send his son to die? Not the way I would have thought it. Not the way I would have planned it. But he sacrificed himself, and Jesus gave himself for us to have total remission of sin. That he would cleanse us with his blood, which has always kind of fascinated me. I never have really... That's an interesting contrast. If you're going to clean yourself, you're probably not going to clean it with blood. Or you clean it with water. No, you clean it with the blood of Jesus. That cleanses us. So we're in just a few minutes, or just, I guess, the next minute, coming up real quick. I think Gary has the scripture reading this morning. Not the scripture reading, but the communion prayer this morning. We're going to be partaking in the Lord's Supper this morning. And I'm going to pray that my eyes are opened. And I'm going to pray that your eyes are open. I'm going to pray the prayer of Elisha, that we might see that this isn't the somber celebration of the death only of Jesus Christ, but the celebration of the victory that we have in Jesus Christ. I hope you've seen from this story in 2 Kings. Sometimes we're blinded because of our fear. Sometimes we're blinded simply because our faith is weak and we don't see. We think we need to see when in fact we don't. Sometimes our vision is limited because we are so consumed by the surroundings. But what if our eyes are no longer blinded by fear and doubt, and we could finally see the victory that has already been won? What if we, like the army of God, what if we as warriors know that we're going into a battle that it's not up to us to win because it has actually already been won? What confidence do you think you could have if you were a warrior in that situation? What confidence, what boldness do you think you could exhibit in your life? For benediction this morning, I'm simply going to read Ephesians chapter 1, verse 18 through 21. Think about that, and if there's something that's on your heart that you would like to share and ask for prayers of the congregation, we're going to have men and women down front, men and women in the foyer in the chapel area. If you would like to open your eyes and be part of this victory in Jesus, become a part of his body, to be baptized, we would love to have you come forward. But whatever the situation is, whether you come forward or whether you stay in your seat, I pray that your eyes would be opened. I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened in order that you may know the hope to which he has called you, the riches of his glorious inheritance in his holy people, and his incomparably great power for us who believe. That power is the same as the mighty strength he exerted when he raised Christ from the dead and seated him at the right hand in the heavenly realms, far above all rule and authority, power and dominion, and every name that is invoked, not only in the present age, but also in the one to come. Let's stand and sing, please.